Good evening, Dr. Rob Wolf in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. How are you, Rob?
I'm well, thank you. How are you? Thanks for having me on your show.
I'm very well, thank you. It's my pleasure to have you on my show. Thank you so much for joining me all the way from Fort Lauderdale in Florida. Can I ask you, what is your jury duty?
Well, I'm doing it now. I'm fighting anti-Semitism. This is what I've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years. Turned my dad's autobiography into a biography, and the stories were so moving that it hit me. It just zapped me that this is what I'm doing. So I'm giving back to the community by sharing my dad's stories in my fight against anti-Semitism and honoring thy father and thy mother many thousands of times in the process. I may not be the most perfect Jewish person, but this is how I'm giving back to the community and the Jewish community in general. So, but I was raised in Orthodox temple and bar mitzvah in Orthodox temple, one of the last ones before they moved to another one, which was conservative. So, very
Mm,
fortunate to have that. My mom didn't get her bat mitzvah until she was in her 70s in
mm,
Michigan, in the United States. So,
mm,
and I don't think my dad even got bar mitzvah. So it's another thing to talk about the Jewish repression. But
mm,
happy to be here. Happy to talk about the book and the fight against anti-Semitism and the comparison about what happened 80, 100 years ago and
mm,
what's going on now, because not
mm.
much has changed.
Thank you for explaining that. That's really fascinating. And I understand the name of your book is Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. And can you tell us, before we delve into it, can you tell us in which country is this set?
It takes the whole book is in Hungary, except maybe the last page or the last chapter where my parents are fortunate enough to escape to Austria and they end up in Vienna, and that's kind of where the book ends. And it's unbelievable. My dad's fourth escape, my mom's first and only escape, but my mom, as much as she was a Holocaust educator, didn't talk much about or didn't put down on paper much about her harrowing history, but she did. They were in hiding most of the time, her and her mom, grandmother, sometimes uncle or grandfather. My dad was on the run all the time. He was either forced labor camp or on the run. Very dynamic history for him. And communist Hungary, no better. So, yeah, we cover Hungary from the end of World War One until the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Nazi Hungary, communist Hungary, two wars, four escapes, 20 miracles, a complete adventure, and a biography about my dad, and on and on and on. Can't say enough good things about him and his demeanor and how he ended up OBGYN, delivers 10,000 babies in his career in Detroit. It's redemption. It doesn't bring back 6 million. It doesn't bring back 50 million people that passed away in World War II, not to mention all the collateral damage. Yeah, on and on and on. But as a form of redemption, and so that's sort of the punchline. Is Dad, after everything he went through, you would never know it, and that in alone is impressive enough.
Wow, that is such a powerful message. And we're recording this the day after Yom HaShoah, the day that each year on the 27th of
Ah.
Nisan globally, we commemorate the Shoah, the Holocaust. And so it's extremely important that we learn about your father's story, your mother's story, and the journeys within that. So thank you very much. Before we delve into more detail about the book, would you tell us a little bit more about your own background and your Jewish educational background?
Well, I was born in Detroit, and my parents, believe me, my parents waited until they had a stable life and a life that with sustenance before they had me, and I get it. So my dad was 40, my mom was 29 when they had me, and he had his first real job when I was born in 1962. So I was very blessed. Raised in Detroit, I was one of three Jewish kids in my high school, 40% African American. I never felt anti-Semitism as a kid. We got picked on. The smaller kids got picked on until we got a reasonable reputation, and that's just how it was. We bullied each other. There was bullying. There was trash talk. But we left it all on the field, as we say, the football field, the basketball court, all the. So I never really felt anti-Semitism. But one of three Jewish kids in the whole high school, 40% African American, a subset of Detroit. And then I went and I was raised in an Orthodox temple. I did the Hebrew school in the Orthodox temple. The temple was built in 1909. They raised it about I think I want to say 1975 to pave way for an assisted living facility, and about a block or two down the road put in a conservative temple, and that still exists. And both my parents' funeral services were held there. The original synagogue was right across the high school. So on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'd be in services, and when we had the break, I'd see all the kids playing outside. I used to get jealous. I'm fasting or I'm praying, so that was always fun. But other than that, so I went to Tufts University in Boston. Very fortunate. University of Michigan Medical School. I became a radiologist. I just retired after 35 years of not hard labor, but sweat. 35 years of in practice, one and residency. And before that, of course, college, medical school, which was University of Michigan, fantastic school, internship in Boston. I did my residency at Brown University in Providence and my neuroradiology fellowship at Yale. So 30 years now, and 30 years to that point, and indentured servitude really, and then but all in 44 years between all the schooling, not including high school, and the practice in medicine. So long haul, a lot of sweat, very gratifying, I guess, because I suppose I've helped thousands of people over the years. I also like sports and music, and I like golf and fitness. I'm a foodie, so I'm into nutrition, history, travel, investing. I've got a lot of interests, but lately my charge has been for the last 6 years working on fighting anti-Semitism and promoting my dad's story, a remarkable story of resilience, and turned his autobiography into a biography, literally.
Wow, that's really incredible. And it sounds like your entire career really has been a form of jury duty. If we look at it, that you've been helping people with their health, with healing and well-being. And we know the most important Jewish value is pikuach nefesh, saving a life. And there's no doubt that your work would have saved and helped many people throughout their lives. So thank you for the broader jury duty that you've done throughout your career in choosing a career. So in line with the importance of Jewish values to do with health. I want to turn to your book. It sounds like it's your Jewish professional passion at the moment, that what you're working on with such vigor, and at such a timely moment in history where you're able to tell your father's story, that you've turned from an autobiography into a biography, and also to use that to fight anti-Semitism is extremely poignant. Can you take us through the book? Can you tell us how's the book been set? How did you manage to adapt it to the biography from your father's autobiography, and what would we expect if we're going to read your book?
Okay, that's a lot. I might have to go to the back end of that question, but
Of course.
so I'm going to start with the history of the book. My mom and dad, so they came to the United States in 1956, arrived in 1957. Harrowing story enough. New York City, Providence, Rhode Island. She met her estranged father. After 18 years, he'd already been remarried. They had got a divorce. They got a divorce, actually. The mother ended up in Israel with the stepfather. They helped my parents tremendously. And her father, he greeted them in New York City, ended up in Providence, awkward situation, remarried. My parents had no idea what they're going to be doing, barely spoke the language. And finally, my dad he got to redo his residency in OBGYN, and then ended up going to Detroit because there are no jobs in Boston. Ended up at a Beth Israel, a Harvard hospital, which is remarkable as it is when you could barely speak English. And I couldn't get into Harvard in any specialty, so a fantastic thing.
Mm.
Back to the 70s, so they're finally established. My dad and mom, they write his stories down as though they'd happened the previous day, very crisp, very sharp. They described the way the table was set, the smells, the sounds, the fear, the colds, the food, unbelievable. So they wrote the stories as though they had happened the previous day. They
Mm.
went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc. So flash forward 1997, my dad passes away, unfortunately. Somewhere in that first 30 years of my life, I read the manuscript, didn't think much of it. My mom was she was a very big Holocaust educator. My dad, not so much, but she was an educator about all hatred and all history anyway, but definitely that too. They were well-respected members of the Jewish community, the medical community. So dad passes in 97. My mom passes in 2016. A historian friend hands me the disc now. It's on a disc and says, you really have to read this. And I didn't think much of it at the time. It took a year to take care of my mom's affairs, retired for a year actually, and did a little travel. And then in 2018, a friend of mine, a radiologist, never burn your bridges, there's another lesson, says to me, look, I'm short radiologist, want to come back and work for me a couple days a week? And I'm like, all right, I did. And maybe it was a little reluctantly, but it brought me to the book. It brought me to the disc.
Mm.
And so on the left, as a radiologist, the left screen is patient queue and the patient work list. On the right screen, we got the images. So between cases, the left screen was my dad's autobiography. The right screen was me dictating into as turning into a biography.
Mm.
And the more I did it, the more intriguing it was, the more motivated I was to say, look, these stories are so amazing that I cannot leave this on a computer. I cannot leave this on a disk. This needs to be shared. 20 miracles, 4 escapes, remarkable resilience, determination, hope,
Mm.
integrity. And so I did. So now we're talking 2019, 2020. The book's sort of a boring biography, queried agents and publishers, and a lot of rejections. Of course, it was dad that was born here, and A to B to C. So I sent the book out to a couple of beta readers, and one of them, Lisa Tenner from Rhode Island, where I did my residency. She's a book coach and a award-winning author. She hooks me up with my co-author, Janice Harper, amazing, another great author and book coach. And Janice has an affiliation with Michigan. She went to Michigan State, as I went to University of Michigan, PhD. She's now in Washington. Fantastic writer, and she turned the book into something special. And so she helped me vet out agents and publishers, very short list. And I know you're from Australia. You don't know much if you know about American baseball, but bottom of the ninth, shoestring catch. We get Amsterdam publishers. So now we're talking 2022. They take on the book. The Holocaust is the only genre they do. If you have any other authors, writers, people that are trying to publish, and
Mm.
if you've got good quality material, I would reach out to Amsterdam publishers for sure. Lisbeth, she's got the swarm of bees around her, as anti-Semitism is very rampant in Europe, and especially in the Netherlands and Holland. And I pray for her. And she's not even Jewish; she's Christian,
Mm.
but a fantastic publisher. So we got that, and the book's been out for a while, but still well received. And the book is just this amazing biography, my dad's life story. It covers the history of Hungary from the end of World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. The two wars. My dad and mom were frontliners in that war. 3,000 people died in just 2 weeks. Not a lot of people know that. My dad had to double down as a trauma surgeon in addition to his OBGYN obligation. So he was working 24/7 for 2 weeks. My mom, a medical student at the time, ran the blood bank. She was about 11 months or 13 months away from graduating when they left in 56 and never got to go back. Unfortunately, I always bust their chops. Oh, we had such more money here, but I get it. Mom had to work while mom had to do research while dad redid his residency in OBGYN. So and it's just an amazing journey, just going through that. And if you knew me 6 or 7 years ago, I mean, I got Holocaust fatigue from my mom because she would tell my wife and the family and the friends about it all the time, and would talk about it every day. Second half of my life, but especially in the last 10 or 15 years of her life. And you would never think that I would write about it or do this.
Mm.
And I just got the zap, I suppose, from it sort of called me, it summoned me, the disc and the story. And here we are. I just couldn't leave that on a computer. I couldn't just let that,
Mm.
as you know.
Yes. Yeah, it's extremely important what you say, because you're not only doing a service for yourself and your family and your descendants, that they will now have access to this incredibly important story of their own history, but you're also giving a gift to humanity and to the Jewish world by sharing your father's story and your mother's story. So it's hugely important work, hugely important jury duty. So thank you for doing that. Very
My
significant.
pleasure. And you're doing the same by having me on and help me spread the word, because I can't fight anti-Semitism alone, and neither can you. We need to recruit a lot of people to do that, and education is the key.
Absolutely, for sure. And I'm so interested to ask you some specific questions about your book. You mentioned the themes of resilience and integrity, and you've referred to 4 escapes and 20 miracles. So I'd like to hone in on that. Can you tell us, when you speak about the 4 escapes, firstly, are you able to outline for us what those escapes are? And after
I
that, if
sure,
we turn to the
yeah, I
miracles,
sure can. And well, I don't want to give too much away because I want people
of
to
course.
be interested. And a lot of people say the book should be a movie, and I don't disagree with them. I mean, in the back of my head, I suppose that's true. It would be Schindler's List on steroids, believe me. Or the movie The Brutalist is out. It's about a Hungarian refugee, Adrian Brody, who did a remarkable job in that movie, and it was Oscar nominated. But this movie it would be The Brutalist on steroids, because a lot more with the escapes and the action adventure, the hiding. But yeah, and in fact, that you mentioned that the first time I read the manuscript, his first escape was about the only thing I remembered. I didn't really think much of the rest of the book until I read it again more closely and realized how miraculous, how good, how lucky my dad was relative to his parents and the majority of the Hungarian people and the European Jews as well. Not to mention the worldwide homicide rate. 50 million people died in World War II, so it's not just 6 million Jews. We get through on the LGBTQ and the disabled, the elderly, the babies. Very disturbing stories. Needless to say, so my dad and his friend Frank, they're in the forced labor camp. They're in the middle of nowhere, Carpathian Mountains. He's a 21-year-old kid. He's been there a couple of months. Cold weather, freezing their ass off. Dad's getting off of a foot infection. He was just back from a hospital. The doctor that treated him in this unsanitary, crappy hospital said to him, "Well, it doesn't matter if I treat your foot or not because you're going to be dead soon anyway." Imagine your doctor saying that. So there's a little excerpt for you. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what he said to him. So my dad limps his way back to the forced labor camp, meets the troops, meets the other forced laborers. They're marching to who knows where. They don't get much news, but they understand that the war might be over soon. So, and they're near the Austrian border, so they don't know whether you should be in Hungary or Austria. You feel like you're a Jew, you're screwed. If they're in Austria and Hitler and the Nazis win, you're dead, man. If they're in Hungary, I mean, they didn't know,
Yeah.
and the way it turned out with the Soviets, with the Russians winning in Hungary, most of the men that survived, 5%, by the way, of forced laborers survived. I don't know about Europe, but I think it's Europe or it might be just Hungary, but that's the statistic I heard. Very, very sad. My dad was on the run and in hiding. Well, we're flashing forward a little bit, and so he survived. Yeah, so they had about a 3-day decision to escape because they didn't want to know what was coming next. They had been tired of getting beaten by the brutes, getting urinated on,
Mm.
starving, doing mindless labor, and getting shot at unarmed because they were paramilitary. They weren't deemed worthy of being in the military because they were Jewish. Unlike the U.S., where 500,000 Jewish men, and I assume a few women. I don't know the exact numbers, but about 500,000 Jews fought for the United States in World War II, including my mom's boyfriend way after the fact. Don't get the wrong idea after my dad passed, but he was from down here in Florida and a Hungarian guy too. Fantastic. Needless to say, so one day they decide to escape, and they do. They just take off at dusk, foothills, cold, thicket, bad weather, and it was a couple minutes before the guards noticed them gone. They said, "Let's split up," and they tried to, and they end up in the middle of the thicket, and just for hours, just dead quiet, scared for their lives, second guessing themselves. You feel the fear. The dogs barking. A third guy followed them, and he got caught. Can you imagine hiding and hearing another guy getting beaten and dragged back to the camp? And then who knows what happened to him? Actually, my dad did know, if I remember correctly, the guy survived, if I remember in the footnotes, but I'd have to go back to that. But hard to believe. And then so they make it so there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I like to talk about this. You're on the run. You don't know where your next meal is coming from. You don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going to be sleeping. You know you're not going to get a job. And you're still wearing that stupid yellow band, the ridiculous yellow band, the yellow stars for the civilians and yellow bands for the laborers, and these stupid hats. No knives, no guns, no way to defend yourself. Worried about wolves and bears. Somehow they made it back to the train tracks, made it back to Budapest, and got a little bit of luck. They had some help with some people. One day they had a truck driver who said, "Oh, look, I can take you guys anywhere you want." Blah 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 blah. He double crosses them, and they end up in what was called the dog pound in Budapest. So it was a collection area for escaped forced laborers. They escaped from that right in front of Nazi Hungary. Split second timing, a lot of luck. Amazing story. Third time, Dad was a med student in Soviet Russia, sorry, Communist Hungary, but under the Soviets, of course, and just had enough of it. He was a medical student and decided to escape. And he made it all the way to the border and argued with a disarmed Russian soldier. He BS'd his way through it, saying he was going to ironically fix X-ray equipment. That's my specialty. And he won the fight. He challenged him to call the administration and this and that. But Dad turned around. He was fear of reprisal, and he just wanted his career to go on. So he chose his medical career over being free from not knowing where he was going to go. So he's still single at that point. And my dad's fourth escape with my mom, Very harrowing. This was at the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 56. Like I said, they were frontliners, so they couldn't really leave right away. But once the war was over, they decided to. And the thing that was funny, the irony that I never really talk about was my dad had no fear. Like by the time they had escaped the fourth time, his risk tolerance level was way up there. But when they're about to escape and they left, my mom had to talk him into doing it. He just got super nervous. So she played some American songs, American jazz songs on their little phonograph that they had to leave behind, and
Mm.
just about everything else too. And very harrowing escape. But my dad's fourth and final. A little teaser: he missed an escape. He went to the wrong train station under communist Hungary. He thought he was the unluckiest guy in the world. Everybody made the right train, including his medical school classmate, and they all got arrested. So the luck on this guy is unbelievable. So,
Mm.
and I prefer to think of it as the hand of God. My dad and mom were not religious, and my dad's parents even converted to Christianity, unfortunately, for their lives and for his career, but they were able to convert back. But my dad mentions God from time to time, and even though he wasn't religious, he felt that he felt that the hand of God was part of it. That definitely helped him, and I definitely think so. I mean,
Mm.
who does that? 20 miracles. I mean, I've only mentioned a handful. I mean, who escapes once, let alone four times,
Yeah.
and then some.
That's such an extraordinary range of circumstances. And you mentioned the risk tolerance level that your father was able to build after completing all these escapes and near escapes. And it's hard to fathom for someone who hasn't been in even one of those circumstances, let alone four or more of those circumstances, just the internal battles and struggles. And I imagine that on some level, that fear you would almost have to activate and use that fear and the adrenaline in order to be able to do that sort of escaping when your life is literally at risk. And I think that we can only, as the future generations of survivors, look and just with the greatest amount of respect and awe for our ancestors, for your father, your mother, who encountered situations that please God we'll never go through again, but that it's really impossible to for someone else to put themselves in their shoes of all the weighing up that they had to do. And you mentioned the 20 miracles. Of all the moments that you and your father consider to be miraculous, was there one moment in particular that you'd like to highlight?
As far as the miracles, well, the escapes, of course, and including their final escape, because anti-Semitism all the way through the book. I mean, that was there was no doubt that anti-Semitism was the theme, and you get it right away. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of things I don't talk about is unfortunately, is what my dad's parents went through. They were hauled off to Auschwitz, as were 500,000 Jewish people in a very, very short period of time, while my dad was at forced labor camp. So that was one of the miracles, is how he found out about their demise, how he found about their whereabouts by a friend who was an Auschwitz survivor and ran into him months after the war. So the way my dad got into medical school was a miracle. There was a 10% quota. Hungary was short doctors after the war, so they needed doctors, and my dad was still he was on the docket, and the way he was lucky to get it was a 10% quota, and he ran into the right person for him to be able to do that.
Mm.
Hiding places you wouldn't expect, wearing women's clothes, casinos, just so many stories to share that you've got to read it to believe it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, there's no doubt. And like a friend of mine said from Michigan, because my dad was a man of integrity, as was his friend Frank, who he probably wouldn't have survived without him. If Dad said that that's what happened, then that's what happened. It's just it is how it is what it is.
Mm. I appreciate you mentioning that integrity, and it's really incredible for a person to maintain their values. The integrity through these moments is extraordinary. Of course, you mentioned earlier that it's been recommended to you that this book could be turned into a movie, and just from what you've told me, it most certainly sounds like it would be a very gripping and poignant movie and very educational for the world in relation to the Holocaust. So I hope that that may be something that comes to fruition in the future.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears. I've got a new interview with a producer from Los Angeles, which is like a miracle in itself today. We've queried a few, but it's a long shot. They've got the fires and everything. But from your mouth to God's and I don't want to be I can't be out of the present just to look at the past, but from your mouth to God's ears. And it doesn't have to be a feature film. It could be a docu-series. It could be a documentary, a docudrama, that kind of thing. But I
Mm.
do think it has a place. I think, and it would circle back as strong as Schindler was, or the Showa movies. It would go a long way in teaching people about, because we are into movies now. We're very audiovisual. Our society now, we've got Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and other forms of entertainment, which makes it tough to get attention to what we're doing. But a movie like that would be phenomenal for sure,
Well, if
and
any,
heartwarming
yeah.
and sad, but very, it could be life changing. Like, as a lot of people have said when they've read the book, as have I. I've learned a lot about history, but I've learned about my dad,
Mm.
my mom, and myself even more so.
Mm. And
Oh, and
also,
one other thing, I don't know how I could do what my dad did and get through it. I don't know any of us could. I mean, the toughest people, our military, our police, frontliners, those are people that maybe could do it, but who knows if it were you or I on the run, or
mm.
having to go through this harrowing. I have no idea how I would handle that.
Mm. And you mentioned that your father went on to be an LBGYN and delivered babies. And so the poignancy and the symbolism, and the reality that in fact he brought life into this world, that is such a profound uh, completion of the story. And of course, yourself,
Amazing.
that you were born and he was able to raise a family and so on. It's really a story of triumph and of hope. So if anyone watching this is a film producer or a miniseries producer or involved in any way, I strongly encourage you to reach out to Rob Wolf to ensure that more people hear your father's story and your mother's story as well. You spoke earlier about your mother being a Holocaust educator, and I understand as well it was difficult for her to speak about her own experiences. And we know from Holocaust survivors that often they didn't speak for decades, that there wasn't the vocabulary to discuss what had happened, and they sometimes feared that people wouldn't believe them, what they'd been through. What you mentioned about how when you first read your father's autobiography, some of it stood out to you, and you sort of wait a little while before revisiting it. It reminded me of a film I saw just the other night, The Ring, with Adir Miller, a very famous Israeli actor, and it's the story of his grandmother and how she survives throughout the war. And also in that movie, it portrays him speaking to, then in the movie, it's played as his mother, where she's speaking to high school students in Israel, and he's saying to her, Mom, maybe you should stop this. You're approaching 80. It's time to, realize maybe the kids aren't so interested. And she speaks so strongly to him and says, "This is my life mission, and you're not going to tell me to not tell my story." And he doesn't really grasp it in that moment. And it's only when she's about to pass away that certain things happen that he realizes that it's in fact his mission now. And I think there's a very deep message that as unfortunately the Holocaust survivors, many of whom have now passed away, as we don't have them with us in many cases now, the baton falls to us. It's now in our hands to tell their stories. So it's a hugely important jury duty and also a global duty to humanity, because you're telling the story of humans as well. You referred earlier to the communism in Hungary and the you mentioned that in the Carpathian Mountains, when they didn't know should they be in Austria, should they be in Hungary. Can I ask you to tell us what you know about the period that's covered between World War One and 1956 in Hungary? For those who might not have the background of Hungarian history, could you give us a brief overview of some of the key historic moments?
Well, I don't know all the details about World War One, but my dad's father was a captain of a ship, a Red Cross ship in World War One in the Black Sea. If we flash back to 1890s and before, the Jews in Europe were well treated. It turned after the turn of the century and after World War One. Admiral Horthy after World War One was one of the Hungarian rulers. The Jews did not feel they thought he was a Jew hater. They had the Red Terror, the White Terror, then the rise of fascism. So we're talking about the 20s and 30s. 20s, I guess, were pretty good. My dad was just a kid then. He was kind of raised a spoiled child, which is another irony, another paradox that he was, and having to go to this forced labor camp and do all this brute, from dawn to dusk while you're starving and not being a tough kid. And believe me, it toughened him up. But his integrity and his intelligence and his being able to outwit the Nazis was an amazing feat. Being young and useful and in his 20s, that was exactly it. He was useful. So they took them off to the forced labor camp. And that probably saved his life. So 1938, 1933 was the real rise of fascism. Of course, it was the Great Depression. I think poverty had something to do with it. Hitler had the military machine going and took advantage of all these countries that just weren't ready for that. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Ukraine. They even thought they were going to conquer Russia. It ended up badly in the end. The Russians saved them, but and that's another story. That's another irony. Like, what if the Americans ended up in Hungary rather than the Russians? I probably wouldn't be here. I would probably have been raised in Hungary, and if I was lucky, gone to medical school in Hungary rather than. So these little things we think of these alternate. What if Hitler won? What if the Germans won? Maybe we wouldn't be here either. We'd be dead. Who knows? But
Mm.
anyway, so 1938 they had these anti-Jewish laws. Couldn't own a radio. Limited time outside, very, very shunned over time. They had newspapers. The newspapers back then were like our social media now. There were newspapers by these anti-Semitic people that they were spreading the word against the Jews. And then Poland was attacked, of course, the 39, and there were Polish refugees that came into Hungary, and we talk a little bit about that. And they were sent back in land for people deal, which has come up. Somebody just did a talk about Romania, and same kind of thing, land for people or whatever. A lifetime, one stroke with a pen, he said, and you're in a different country, and it can be to your demise. So those Polish people were sent back, and it went badly for them. So and the Hungarians really, they were occupied, but the 43, 44 was the toughest time for the Hungarians. 43 in October, my dad was dragged away to his forced labor camp, October 4th, actually, which coincidentally, my bar mitzvah was October 4th, 32 years later in 1975. And
That's
so, I mean, October was a weird month for my mom passed in October, my bar mitzvah, my dad left for forced labor camp. The couple of course, the attacks, the Hamas attacks were in October, Yom Kippur War. Anyway, so now my dad's in forced labor camp. So now the war ends, 44, 45, the Danube, about the people, 21,000 people getting shot in cold blood. They've got the shoes on the Danube. Apparently, there were no witnesses. The witnesses were the next victim, no lawyers, no phones, no cameras, just boom, one person after another. And that was and that was the arrow on the Arrow Cross was another leader in Hungary, very, very brutal. And my dad regaled, unfortunately, that he recanted that the Hungarians were the police and the gendarme and the Arrow Cross were worse to the Jews than the Nazis actually were. So, and then time goes by. Dad, he gets into medical school. He does his residency, excuse me, in OB/GYN, and he meets my mom, and they get married in 1953 under Stalin. Stalin's paranoid at this point. He's losing it. He dies. He dies soon after. But my parents had an illegal Jewish wedding under communist Hungary, and the sponsor, the host, my mom's uncle, was a surgeon, and he was a big wig in Budapest, chief of surgery. Got arrested, hauled off to some Russian prison, and tortured, and for 11 months, 13 months, and finally comes back a broken man. They throw him out in suburbia, and he runs some clinic. And fortunately, he moved with his daughter and wife to Sweden, and they prospered afterwards. Thank God. His daughter Susie just passed away about a week or two after the Hamas attacks, and she was in a coma at the time. She was the last survivor in the book, and hopefully, I mean, I hate to see her die, but hopefully she didn't know much about the attacks because I understand she was in a coma. So now we're at 1956. There's an uprising. There's kids. There's kids at the radio station, college kids and young adults, and people who are just looking for change. It happened in Czechoslovakia, of course, I think 68, if I got the year right. Later on with Walesa in Poland, the uprisings later. But for Hungary, it was 1956. They just had it with the communists. And a tough war. They were, snipers and tanks versus people and that kind of thing. And the Russians won handily. It was ugly. Budapest destroyed. And the hardliners became even more so. And so my parents said, that's enough. And they were already way behind most of the refugees. So a lot of refugees had already left, the ones that survived. And, they're closing down the borders. They're chopping down trees to block big roads. My parents snuck out through farms and mud and cold and having to stay down on the ground while the Russian planes are the surveillance planes going over with the lights on, and anti-Semitic remarks by the renegade, the guy that helped them, anti-Semitic remarks by the guards at the border, who they bribed with bottles of rum, and they got drunk and said, "Oh, Hitler's not such a bad guy," and this and that. And believe me, my parents wanted to argue with them left and right, but they knew better because they could have been shot, killed, sent back, whatever. So they kept their mouths shut and moved on because they just wanted to be free at any cost.
I'm speechless. I mean, these are,
Right? What do you say to that? I
I
mean,
mean,
what do you say to that?
I really appreciate you providing the historic context, not only in Hungary, but also in some of the neighboring European countries as well. It's very important that we understand who was in power at the different regions at the time, and the chronology of what you've explained is very significant. And the way that you're able to intertwine your parents' stories into that is extremely poignant and extremely powerful. And particularly, you mentioned the date of the 4th of October, that it's both the day that your father was dragged away in 1943 in Hungary and the date of your bar mitzvah. I mean, I can't imagine a more poignant, a more powerful juxtaposition that represents Jewish life, Jewish resilience, hope for the future than that. It's an incredible symbolism and sign of life of the next generation that you represent. And I'm sure for your parents, uh, the fact that they were able to have a child, have a family after everything they went through could have only, been an incredible a recognition of the power of life itself. So you yourself are the embodiment of that hope of your parents every time they escaped, every time they went through the unthinkable. It was so that you would be able to come into the world and do what you're doing. So
I'm
it's
very
really,
fortunate. That's where you read that and you say, "My dad was lucky to be here. I'm lucky to be here." But hope is a big word. Hope is a big, and we need to carry that forward to what's going on now. And in my book presentation, we talk about hope, resilience, determination, loneliness, fear, and integrity, and ultimately redemption. With my dad and my mom doing with a big smile on his face and no signs of PTSD. They could have gone to the bottle, they could have gone to drugs, they could have gone to have psychological issues. Really, very, very strong people, and I hope that carries on with me. I've been trying to stay strong for 60 some odd years. So, but my mom and dad did it, and it's very inspiring.
I can only imagine that they would be beyond proud of what you have done, both with your career now, with fighting anti-Semitism. It's very profound, very profound. I
If
hope.
she'd give me the Jewish guilt, she'd say with her Hungarian accent, "You couldn't do this while we were still alive." That's what she would say. Say, "Sorry, mom, better late than never." That's another message I have. It's never too late to do the right thing. If and if you're bored and you don't like what you're doing, don't go protest at Columbia University and Harvard calling for the death of Israel, the death of the United States and democracy. Go get another job or go volunteer at a library or write a book, write a poem, write an opera. Spend more time with your kids. Enjoy whatever short life we have because the time is our only commodity. This is something else I'm repeating now as I'm kind of on the other side, maybe, maybe not, who knows. But stocks, bonds, real estate, gold, crypto, those aren't anything. Those are man-made things. It's interest rates, tariffs, whatever. But time is our commodity. So enjoy it. Don't waste it, and don't waste my time. And don't say you're better than me. I'm a third generation doctor. It's like I'm not going to start challenging people about we've helped society. My dad's father was a dentist, killed in Auschwitz, a real threat to society. And my dad's mom was a sweetheart, a dentist's wife who shared stories and food with the less learned and the less fortunate. His dad gave freebies, pro bono work to the less fortunate in his community. And it turns out some of the guards in their forced labor camp, which helped my dad down the road, and some other maybe get a little extra food and things snuck in by
Mm.
either cash or favors like his dad did. So yeah, so don't say, and I'm not into this. Some people say, well, the Jews are the chosen people. I don't like that. I mean, because how do I know we're right? I mean, I got faith. You've got faith. I believe. But who's to say the Christians aren't right, or the Muslims, or the Hindus? I mean, or maybe we're all right, or maybe we're all wrong. We don't know. I mean, it's just something we don't know, and there's no witness, there's no testimony of anybody who can really to attest to that. However, we need to respect each other's beliefs and religions because we have 7 billion people on this planet now, and God knows how many religions. And look, radical Islam is radical Islam, and that's our comparison now to Nazi Hungary and maybe even communist Hungary, and
Mm,
not just Hungary, the Nazi Europe. I mean, if Hitler had his way, he would have run the world, and
mm,
maybe the communists under the hardcore Stalin and whoever. I mean, they couldn't afford it as they finally went bankrupt, and
yeah.
maybe that was a good turning point towards peace and the end of the Cold War. But now it's
Mm,
obviously resurfaced.
mm. It's really interesting what you say about the humility that we must all have as human beings. We're 7 billion people sharing the planet, and the idea of faith that, each person is entitled to have their own faith, and the need for us to respect one another is such an important message. And thank you for sharing that. As you were speaking about the ways in which your grandparents and your parents of blessed memory have built life, and you're encouraging people today to build, to create life, to do positive things, to be constructive in society. I thought of the Hebrew phrase, Al tomru bonayich ela banayich, which means don't say your builders, rather your children, or rather your sons in this case, that we translate often as children, that it's really the next generation that builds. And it's such a responsibility for our generation to be able to say to younger generations how important it is to invest in building societies. And of course, there's disruptions that go on in society, and sometimes building does involve disruptions, but to be constructive in how we build, and to build with a vision and a value of life, which I think is core to Jewish tradition. So that's a really beautiful message that you shared. So thank you for that. I'm wondering
Oh,
if
my
we,
pleasure. I couldn't agree more. I mean, well said. I mean, this is what we do. You know, you're in the same camp as me. We're trying to fight hate, and we
yeah,
shouldn't even have to be having this conversation. And there's all these commercials now in the U.S. Stand up to hate. It's sponsored by Bob Kraft, owner of the New England Patriots, who's a staunch Israel supporter. And I've even sent a copy of my book. He kept the book, but he sent me back a letter and saying, "Well, we can't really do a program for you and all that." Well, okay, but you can, that's the thing. I mean, all these people, that's another thing, the apathy towards anti-Semitism. Now, I get that. I mean, there is, it's not just the Christians, it's the Jews. So that makes me even more disappointed. And then people that fuel the flames, especially professional athletes and professional musicians that we've had in the US, African Americans that are talking about what they don't realize, and Hamas as well, and the people that allowed Hitler, you guys were next. You have no idea. The disabled, the LGBTQ have been put down the Jews, and it's like you guys, you just don't get it. I mean, it's you guys were next, and there was the Aryan race. There's the idea of white supremacy. It still exists, and it's scary.
mm,
That what was it? The January 6th, if I have the right date. The attacks on the in Washington D.C. Some of those people were really scary and made. I'm not going to say who I support in our politics, but it just made America look bad. It was a big black eye in the United States because I didn't really think that was out there. But uh, the election and then October 7th, it really fuels the fire. And people are sheep sometimes, and they don't know who to follow. And they're getting bad information, of course, with the social media. We know that. And people need to read more. You read the history books. Take a class, adult education, volunteer somewhere, do something good for it. Don't protest in the cold and not let students into the university that the kids and God, I would give my left, what, to be in Harvard or Yale or Columbia or Stanford. And these kids, they're abusing the privilege. And look, you don't like our country, we'll send you away. You can go back, you can go help rebuild Gaza, go run for office, do whatever you need to do, but don't be threatening. Nobody has the right to tell somebody how long they should live or where they should live or what they can do, except for God. To me, I don't think that's any race, religion, creed, or color. Nobody has that right.
Yeah, well, we understand that, of course, there's so many layers and so much complexity. Even, for example, when we're looking at the protests at campuses across Western society, we know that often there are many actors there who are not even enrolled in those universities. We know that foreign funding has come into a lot of that. There are so many levels, and the phrase useful idiots is often used for people who may not have any understanding of the conflict, but decide that there's a very low bar for entry to join the bandwagon. And it's very important that we realize that we need to encourage education. We need to ensure that that the bylaws of the universities are upheld, and that where hate speech and incitement to violence is occurring, that there is law enforcement and legislation to protect everyone, not just to protect the Jewish students, but to protect anyone of any minority, of any human being, because as you mentioned, we understand that when there's a rise in anti-Semitism, it's the canary in the coal mine that tells us that the social cohesion of a society is breaking down. And of course, it would be very naive of anyone to think that it would end there if we don't stand up to it. So, of course, reiterating that call, as always, to stand up if you, as you said, if you experience hatred, and to educate yourself, and if you see that others experience hatred, as much as if it was yourself, to stand up for that. Can I ask you, when we look at anti-Semitism in the world today, um, what do you find is most concerning for you personally as a second generation survivor? Do you see parallels to previous generations and to your parents' stories today, or do you feel that it's a very different world?
No, it's not very different. Some of it's the same, some of it's different. We talk about that in our book presentation. I love two expressions you said before I forget: low bar of entry and useful idiots. I got to remember to use those because that is so well said. And yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. But a lot of parallels. I mean, the uprising of the Nazis of fascism in the 1930s. Canada, it's accelerating. I'm hearing more and more bad news out of Canada that Jews are barred, and the politics are swinging towards people that are radical. United States, maybe not so much. I like hearing news. So there is hope, and we're going to go back to that because. So I am concerned, but at least here's the thing: the guns, the military and the police guns aren't pointed at me; they're still pointed at our enemies. And as long as that happens, our government supports me and you and all, freedom of religion and speech within reason. I feel okay. But when they start turning it the other way, then I'll be concerned, or if we have armored trucks and tanks with those ugly flags, the Hamas flags, in the streets of Miami and Sydney and Melbourne and New York City, if they're then we'll all be thinking twice about it, whether you're Christian or Jewish or anybody else who doesn't fit in. If you're an infidel, is the word I think they use.
Mm.
Many parallels otherwise, but fortunately, we're not there yet. I think the United States is clamping down a little bit. They're defunding the schools. If I had a kid in one of those schools, I would definitely find the best lawyer around and sue. And if I were a student there, I'd keep going to the weight room and barge my way through. If you want me to not go to class, you better shoot me or stab me. That would be my attitude, and
That's for
it's not the right,
sure.
not an attitude I should have because I'm not some mafia guy. I'm not some tough guy, but I'm not going to let you. I'm spending all this money to go to class. You don't have a right to stop me from getting educated or stop me from voting. So there are parallels with that. Hopefully, it doesn't get out of control. In Florida, it's been squelched a little bit. It was here, and then it's good to see on the campuses that the federal government is looking at it and with some serious decisions to make. I wouldn't want to be a politician right now, especially with Ukraine and the Gaza war and then the anti-Semitic. It would be horrible. I wouldn't, thank
Mm.
God. But and the other thing is, so the new mayor of Hollywood, Beverly Hills, California, very popular place, very liberal place. Arguably maybe not always so good for Jewish people, but I'm sure there are a lot of Jewish people that live in the area. She's Jewish. The new president of Mexico is Jewish, so it's good to see that kind of thing, and not because they're Jewish, but hopefully they can put a damper on this hatred and anti-Semitism just by their own leadership. We'll see.
Mm. And there's a lot of discussion, from my understanding, within America in relation to Trump's most recent domestic policies, clamping down on universities that have, not fulfilled their duties to protect Jewish students. And I've heard different perspectives and positions on people who feel supported by these decisions, and other people who are saying they feel concerned about issues to do with free speech still, and will this impact more broadly? And is anti-Semitism a guise for Trump wanting to have a more authoritarian style of power? And of course, we understand that there's other issues in relation to the defunding of the Federal Ministry of Education, the Education Department, sorry. And so there's so much going on in American society at the moment. Can I ask you, can you tell us what the mood is like from your perspective in America at the moment in relation to the fact that there are so many policies that Trump is implementing simultaneously. Do you feel that people are confused by uh, this flurry of policy making, which is so pivotal and so consequential for so many people?
Well, I can't read Trump's mind because he's all over the place sometimes, and so is everybody else sometimes. But what I do like is we need to learn to think out of the box. We've got to do something. We have a $36 trillion debt in this country and rising, so we're not going to survive if that keeps happening. So like tariffs, you start off with a bang. You start off, the art of the deal. You start off with some eye-opening policy or eye-opening negotiation, and they're doing the same thing with the universities. Start with, well, we're not going to fund you. Well, we'll clean up the campus. We'll get these kids off. We'll get these kids. All right, then we'll start funding you a little bit, and that's how it should work. I mean, that's fair is fair. It's not like it's a permanent thing. I don't think. I mean, I'm not in these negotiations, but universities require money, research, teaching, and look, you got to teach. You can't teach these kids hate. I'm educating my own way. In fact, that's what my book should be taught in the classroom because education starts there and at home, of course. So, but in the university, you know how kids are. And when you go to university, liberal thinking, different thinking, whatever, not necessarily agreeing with your parents or what you learned at home. So, I think that I think money is one way to do it. But again, education is the thing. So his policies are mixed. They change every day. I can't keep, you need a program to keep up with it. But
Mm.
I think defunding some of these upper echelon schools is a start and negotiate. Yeah, let's talk about hate. Let's talk about what you guys are doing wrong, and not taking months to do it because it's been ridiculously long, way
Mm.
too long. Any of this has happened.
Yeah, it's interesting, as you said, no one can read Trump's mind. And, as you gave the example with the tariffs, they changed every day. And I guess, he would be having different advisors guide him in relation to the effects on the stock market and the flow and effects in terms of international trade and so on. But you do wonder whether the confusion that is caused and the paralysis that is caused in some ways because of the uncertainty created by this flurry of decision making and people trying to guess and second guess, is this part of the negotiating deal that he's doing, which many suspect it is, or is this actually something that's going to remain, the very high tariffs on China, for example, the flow on effects. There's so many both economic and other domestic policy decisions going on simultaneously. It's obviously a very dynamic space. And when we look broadly at what's going on internationally with whether it's Russia, China, Iran, it's interesting to see the question, and we spoke about this earlier in terms of democracy versus dictatorship. Where are the lines between societies that are free and fair in spirit, in intention, as well as in laws, versus those not. And I understand that democracy is a very important value that you espouse based on your family's history.
Of course, maybe it shouldn't be up to the federal government to negotiate with these universities. Maybe it should be the governors or the senators and the congressmen. Maybe it's not. To me, it's worthy of going to the federal government, but we shouldn't even have to this conversation shouldn't be happening. We should be.
Mm.
When I was in college and med school, I never felt safer. When I was in Israel, I never felt safer. I mean, so as long as these kids need to be felt safe and people trying to prevent education it's probably the same thing that's gone on in Gaza the last, who knows, 10, 20 years, where they were trapped in this thing and building tunnels and now even the civilians in Gaza supposedly are calling out to Hamas to cut it out, to cut the crap. Syria, they revolted, and I'm glad to see that the civilians are stepping forward. So it's hard, you've got fear. Poverty is a part of it. Fear is a part of it. You're on the wrong end of the gun. You're on the wrong end of the power. So it's great to see people trying to step up. And I really hope for peace in the Middle East and Ukraine and Russia. And that would be contagious. Let's go back to how it was in I don't know, 20, 30 years ago between Vietnam, after the recessions and when times were better, the 90s, maybe early 2000, the turn of the century after we got through Y2K,
Mm.
except for 9/11, which was horrible. I mean, and people that deny the Holocaust, some of these kids, not to get off the subject, denied 9/11. And I might remind these guys that these kids that 9/11 was an attack against America, not against Jews. And it was by terrorists, very, very radical terrorists. And Jews died, and Muslims, and Christians, and Asians. And we rallied as a country back then. We really did. And that's probably about the last time we rallied as a country. Now it's so confusing. COVID, maybe we rallied as a country very, very temporarily, but not since World War II have we seen that. There hasn't been cohesion with the Vietnam War, which was a fight against communism, and the Korean War, a fight against communism. So I'm sure my parents supported those wars, but although they did not support death and destruction, and as you know, but because they being in medicine, the preservation of life is everything, as it is for me. So it's very contradicting, and I can't think how these people think. The ones that tortured my dad, that urinated on them, that beat them, and now 80, 100 years later, they find different ways to persecute, to maim, to torture, to punish, to kill. The song remains the same, different circumstances, but the
Mm.
song remains the same.
Indeed, you've mentioned a lot of key moments in history, many tragedies of history, which had the impact of uniting people, but often only in the immediate aftermath, and that effect tended to wear off, and then there have been more conflicts within the society. And we speak about education being so important, and of course, there's many societies where hate is being preached, and it's so important that we recognize that it's really, I consider it, for if children are being preached to hate, it's really an abuse of their rights as children. And it's very important that we realize globally how important it is to protect children from being exposed to hate education. We've covered so many topics, and of course, your book is such a profound contribution to history of the Holocaust, to your family's history in particular, and you thread through it the period from World War One until 1956, explaining about Hungarian history. You speak about the miracles, the 20 miracles, and the four escapes, if not more escapes, that your father and your mother experienced. And what you're doing in terms of your book tours and your interviews to share their story is an incredibly important form of jury duty. And you're role modeling to other people the importance of us carrying the baton now, in the honor of the Holocaust survivors, in honor of the victims, to share their stories for the next generation. And I'm very grateful to you for doing that and for coming on Jury Duty to speak about your work. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful. I'm honored to be on. And please reach out if you read Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. 4 escapes, 4 awards, 20 miracles. We haven't talked about the awards. It's unbelievable that I don't pat myself on the back. I'm not big into self-congratulations, but people that are in the know accept the quality of the work, the importance of the work, and I owe it all to my team, my co-author, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't be here talking about that either. But Google Robert J. Wolf, MD, my website, robertjwolfmd.com, or Google Not a Real Enemy. You'll find the book. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And I'm on socials across the board. You can find me on Meta, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, my favorite platform, and now recently Blue Sky and TikTok. But whatever, I'm just trying to reach a lot of people and just recruit them in our fight against hate and anti-Semitism. And I can't do it by myself. You can't do it by yourself, but slowly we network, we get more people to buy into it. And then the 99.9% of us, we wrap our hands around the ones that hate and say, look, it's our way or the highway. You can't be doing this. And that's the goal.
That's a very powerful message, and you're clearly working overtime, as you may have done in your medical career. You are now transferring that to your career to fight
I'm
anti-Semitism.
working harder now than I was practicing medicine, at least recently. Back in the day, forget about it.
Yeah.
No doubt.
It's very important work, and we'll include a link to your books and to your socials in the description of this video. And I highly encourage everyone to have a click on those links and have a look at the book. And as we said earlier, if anyone watching is a film producer or involved in creating any sort of series that this could be brought to the screen, please reach out to Robert as well. Robert Wolf in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thank you so much for your time on Jury Duty.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I hope to speak again soon. Bye bye.